Honestly, at first this video was just me being petty, but we seriously need to have a conversation about trigger warnings because apparently Twitter threads aren't enough anymore. I first became aware of Follow the River by C. Ritchie when I saw this tweet with the author's note at the beginning of her book, where the author says she is including a blanket trigger warning for her book. However, she's not going to include any specific trigger warnings because she thinks trigger warnings ruin the experience of a book. Now, I'm absolutely a big fan of trigger warnings and extremely annoying. So my first reaction when I saw that was, I must read this book and put trigger warnings on every single platform that I have. However, every single review will be spoiler free, except for I'm including in this video a little bit of vlog footage. I don't think that's spoilery, but if you want to read this, which honestly don't, but if you do, maybe you'll find it a little spoilery. I'll have timestamps for the trigger warnings in this video, as well as announce trigger warnings in big letters. So if you don't want to look at trigger warnings, you don't need to. You can skip the part of this video, you can skip the review, as you could skip a page in a book that stated trigger warnings. I don't think it's that hard. Now, we'll go into a discussion about trigger warnings a little bit later in the video, but first, let me tell you about Follow the River by C.E. Ritchie. Follow the River was published December last year, so it's still a new-ish release since we're in January right now. It's a run-of-the-mill dark romance where we follow two lead male characters who play American football and have this friends to enemies to lovers interaction dynamic. Honestly, this book was boring, and if it wasn't for the shock value, it would be just boring. But with the shock value added, it was boring and disturbing. Well done? Okay, I don't want to keep anyone waiting on this specific part because it's the point of the video, so let's talk about the trigger warnings in Follow the River. I was as sensitive with this book as I would be with any other, so I wouldn't consider this the master list of all the trigger warnings that could be included in Follow the River. So I have my laptop right here and a list of trigger warnings that I wrote as I went through reading the book, and in order of appearance we have, let me scooch to the side so that you can see a list right here. The trigger warnings for Follow the River are as follow: mentions of sexual abuse of a minor, PTSD, depression, mentions of suicidal ideation, mentions of a suicide attempt, homophobia, biphobia. Stop cutting trees, that's not a trigger warning. Use of the F slur, sexual harassment, drug use, bad therapist, which is 100% a trigger warning, sexual assault, rape on page between the love interests, and graphic sexual abuse of a minor for too many pages by a parental figure. Now, before we continue, let me show you some short vlog footage of me reading this book, which was an adventure for me. I did not have fun, no. Most of this footage is me in my bed, so you've been warned. I'm officially a third into this book. I'm on the second therapy scene. This isn't the worst therapist I've ever read about, but it isn't the best either. It's not good. It's just not good. The writing isn't good. The dialogue is annoying. We keep switching into like internal monologue, but those italic, internal monologue, that's just annoying, honestly. I literally just said the therapist isn't that bad, and the exact next fucking page, the therapist is like, you know what? Victim blaming. You know what? Maybe it isn't so bad that you've been sexually harassed. Maybe it's good for you, actually. I'm tired. If I see one more hand around one more throat, I might lose my mind. I just threw my Kindle across my bed from how disgusting this is. Honestly, like, up to this point I was just like, yeah, dark romance things, you're a bit of a bitch for not including trigger warnings, and even more of a bitch for not allowing people to include them in their reviews. But this is graphic abuse of a child. It's pages of it. Honestly, jail. Like, how can you be so insensitive to other people's trauma and other people's struggle. Maybe the author went through something like this, I don't know. And maybe they're okay reading shit like this, I don't know. But how can you be so blind to the way that other people struggle that you can't think about what wrong you were doing without not warning readers before you write something so disgusting? I'm actually about to lose my mind. So this therapist, right, this one of the main guys has been going to, she's been paid by his mother, like his mother pays for the therapy sessions, and she relays our sessions back to his mother. This is not even a child. Even if this was a child, but this is not even a child. That's an adult. I'm so I'm so mad. I'm so mad. Also, this fucking whole information about the sexual assault this guy suffered as a fucking child made it out to the media, and the media fucking published his name. His full name. I'm losing my mind. Don't read this. Don't touch this with a 10-foot pole. 10 feet. Don't touch this. I think Siri got lost in both the trigger warnings are spoilers and these special snowflakes need trigger warnings for everything nowadays discourse that goes around Twitter every other month. So it's not that special. It's perfectly fine if you don't want to know trigger warnings before you go into a book. If you think as a reader that will spoil your experience, don't read the trigger warnings. Don't look at them in reviews. Don't look at them in a page, even though like I could grab any book here and the likelihood of it including trigger warnings is small. However, neither of these books are dark romances that deal with sexual abuse of children and don't warn me before they do so. And I think that's the main point. You don't need to look at trigger warnings if you don't want to, but if you have any specific triggers that might cause anything from discomfort to full-blown panic, you can look at the trigger warnings, either that the author gives you in the book, in their social media, or that reviewers are nice enough to include in their reviews. It's a kindness. This woman is telling you not to be kind to your fellow readers, to your followers, to your subscribers. It's all she's doing. Not to say, trigger warnings can also work as sellers for readers. So if you want to read more about depression, which this book touches on mildly, maybe you will be interested in this book. You never know. Trigger warnings aren't just specific to things we consider societally as taboo. So if you think you are helping your sales or adding to the reader's experience by being like, this has a blanket trigger warning, you're not. You're absolutely not. All you're saying to me, all that I read this author's note, which I'll link the tweet down below, and it's actually in the book, it's not made up, that's what's written in the book. All you're saying is, my book can't stand on its own without the shock value that I put in it. Is it true about this book? Yes, but you don't need to do that to your marketing. Obviously, you can play devil's advocate and you can say, oh, real life doesn't come with warnings. Real life doesn't have dragons either, and they're in books. So, what's your excuse now? What is it? Tell me, please. I honestly think it's important for me to touch on the subject of dark romances as well, or any books with taboo topics, because this isn't an attack on those books. Sometimes writing can be therapeutic. And if in your personal life you want to write about the most fucked up, triggering, taboo subjects, that's okay. You should never judge anyone on what they write in their personal life. That's for them. If they want to write about like really fucked up shit, and if that helps them deal with their trauma, that's alright. Honestly, as long as it's not leading you to commit crimes in real life, continue writing about that fucked up shit if that's what helps you. But when you publish this book, when you make it public, when you put it behind the paywall, You need to bring ethics into it. You have a responsibility to your reader base. And honestly, not romanticizing sexual assault is literally the bare minimum. Like, we talk a lot about how fiction can normalize certain things, like consent or like being LGBT, but that argument works in reverse as well. The more you read about a certain taboo topic, the more you become numb to it, the more you become used to it. And you need to be very aware of these consequences in your relationship with fiction. Yeah, reading is just for fun, but you need to be aware of things. You can't live in a this has nothing to do with the rest of my life bubble always, because it does. The fiction you read impacts your real life. I'm obviously not saying you shouldn't read dark romances. All I'm saying is that it's important to be aware. And part of that awareness is being aware that the topics you discuss in a book are triggering to readers, and you need to warn them about what you're writing about the topics in the book that they're about to read. Trigger warnings are literally the bare minimum. Fanfiction writers use them all the time, and that's mostly free content anyway. If you are an author who publicly talks about the trigger warnings in your book, well done. I don't think it's easy, especially when you publish traditionally, to actually get said trigger warnings in your book, and it's not just up to the authors, I don't think. So if like people who know more about publishing can let me know on that area. But if you talk about them on Twitter, on Instagram, you are doing great. If you are a reviewer who puts trigger warnings in your reviews, honestly, thank you. You are standing up for your own mental health and the mental health of your subscribers, your followers, wherever it is. I personally don't need trigger warnings in the content I consume, especially written content. But part of existing in the world is knowing that your own experience isn't universal. Maybe C. Ricci doesn't need trigger warnings in her book, but she should be aware that just because she doesn't mean other people don't. Like, some people depend on trigger warnings to interact with media, other people just like to be prepared for what they're about to confront themselves with. That's both valid reasons to be aware of trigger warnings. Honestly, take a shot every time I say trigger warnings. I think the worst part about this is not that she didn't put the trigger warnings in the book, is that she asked readers not to include trigger warnings in their reviews. That's ableist, and that's disrespectful to your entire future reader base. It's so self-centered, and it's selling the book on shock value on its own. Anyway, as I said, despite the dark romance, the you should go into this blind thing that the author has going on, this was boring. The only times where I wasn't bored, I was disgusted and I wanted to throw my Kindle at the wall. If I had seen the trigger warnings on this book, maybe I wouldn't have read it. Well, I read it just to be annoying and make this video and post trigger warnings everywhere, but this isn't the kind of content that I consume anyway. And I think letting people be aware of trigger warnings would take away a lot of bad reviews, even though the book has a 4.25 stars on Goodreads, which just, that escapes me, I cannot explain that. This video has a really simple moral. Just be kind, be empathetic to others. Don't assume just because you enjoy going into books blind, other people enjoy doing the same. Honestly, I think that is all for me. I'm gonna edit this video so that I can post my review on every single platform that I have, including Amazon. So you can find me on all of them: Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads. Amazon isn't social media, but I'll post my review there as well. Here on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know how you feel about trigger warnings. Do you need them? Do you read them? Do you seek them out? How do you feel about trigger warnings? Let's discuss, and I'll see you discuss, and I'll see you next time. Bye!